Associate Director at the Office of Career Services. And when you say federal government, what does anybody think? Anybody? What first comes to your head? Taxes, national security, corruption, waste, whatever. A lot of things come to mind. But usually it's not jobs for you. There's a lot of talk about jobs for other people, a lot of talk about jobs. Very few people know the scope of the employment in the federal government, but it is very big. So today, I'm going to try to talk about just how kind of big the federal government is, how many job options exist in it. I'm going to give you a general overview of that, and then more importantly, or very important for this, I'm going to talk about a few things we're not going to be addressing today, but that you will maybe want to look into in the future and can't find resources in at other places and at other times. And then I'm going to get into the dynamics of actually applying to the federal government specifically for the summer and postgraduate or honors internships. And at the end, I'll try to give you a little handout here. I may not have enough for everybody, but we have plenty back in the Career Center, and we will certainly talk about that. On your handout, there are some sites already listed, and as you see, one of the most important ones is going to be the Arizona site, and I'll give you the password for that before you leave. Absolutely. So, getting into the overview of the federal government, any guess how many people work for the federal government as a whole? Numbers. All federal government. Wild guess. Anything? Half a million? Okay. Any others? Okay. The latest OPM figures as of about January of 2003 say there are 2.7 million people who work for the federal government. 2.7 million. Now, that's interesting. To put it into context, that's down quite a bit from several years ago. In 1986, there were well over 3 million people working for the federal government. And that, even though the numbers are trending down, it's still a lot of people working for it. Another interesting point that you may want to think about when you think about working for the federal government is that the average age has increasingly gone up for employees in the federal government. I think the latest figure they had was just a couple of years ago. The average age was 46 and a half. In 1991, it was 42.5. So what that means is that the workforce in the federal government is aging. And that means over the next 5 to 10 years, there's going to be an awful lot of retirement going on in the federal government, which means that the opportunities are going to be greatly expanding at all levels. So that's something to definitely consider when you're thinking about that. I did mention that there were total 2.7 million. There are, however, only, and that's the whole federal government, there are only 30,000 employees in the entire legislative branch. There are only 34,000 employees in the entire judiciary branch. So that gives you an idea of how many people are distributed in the federal government, and the vast majority would be, therefore, in the executive branch. However, before I move on, even though we're not going to be talking about the judiciary or the federal branch today, we're not going to be talking about clerkships at all. That's going to be for another time. That's something you should look into, though. But there are good opportunities to work for the federal government in both the judiciary and the legislative branch. I have a couple of sites up here that you might want to look into. One of the, in addition to, let's say, the legislative branch, where you could work for a congressman or a senator as a staffer, which are very good jobs. You can work on committees as attorneys. Those tend to be a little more connected. Those tend to be a little more political. But the legislative branch also encompasses several other agencies that are also very good opportunities to work at if you're a lawyer. For instance, the GAO, the General Accounting Office, which is Congress's investigative arm, an oversight branch. They look into They investigate or oversee and audit every single agency in the entire government for their budget, for what they do and what they don't do, always issuing reports. Very interesting place. There is an exception. They do have a summer and an honors program, and that will be on the Arizona site that I'll mention again. So that is one thing that you can get through on both summers and honors programs. There's also AOC.gov, that's the architect of the Capitol. They do an awful lot of work with the grounds, the upkeep of the place, the land use. That's also some legal opportunities there. And most particularly, this is something that a lot of people don't recognize, is that the Library of Congress, LOC.gov, is a very, very interesting place to work, particularly the Congressional Research Service. They have an awful lot of opportunities for people who are even entry-level attorneys to do research in every area of the law. Let's say a congressman or senator has a question about the law, they will send it down to the Library of Congress, Congressional Research Service, they will research it. If you're interested in research and writing, or the more academic side of the law, that's a good place to look. And that's, again, the Congressional Research Service. So that's about it for the legislative branch. Happy to talk more about that with you individually, but again, we're not focusing on that now. A brief mention about the judiciary. Again, aside from clerkships and so forth, you can look on uscourts.gov. That's a great place to look for any type of information about the courts, clerkships included, but also staff positions, various research positions, other things that are going on with the courts themselves. But again, we're not going to be dealing with that right away. There is another site for the overall kind of information on the federal government, which is on your green sheet, which is sponsored by NALP, and that's at nalp.org. And they have an awful lot of information, very, very comprehensive and detailed site that I suggest you look at, which talks about every federal agency in great detail, and that's something that you should look at. In addition to this book, which is the Federal Yellow Book, we have copies of that in the Career Center Library, and that's something that you'll want to look at. An amazing resource. Every single agency, whether it's cabinet level or whether it's independent agency, people's names, directors, chief counsels, general counsels, offices, everybody is in here, so take a peek at that when you can. We also have a book, I believe, on the judiciary and the legislative branch down there, so please take a peek at that as well. Those will be some really good resources. Okay, but today we're really going to focus on the executive branch, and out of the 2.7 million people that I mentioned, so therefore about roughly 2.6 million people work there. We have to deduct about 700,000 people who are just active military, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, which leaves about 2 million total employees in the executive department that are divided in between the cabinet level agencies and the independent agencies. And that out of those, there are roughly, tough to get exact figures, but about 30,000 lawyers working in the executive branch as attorneys, and that number maybe includes some paralegals. The government kind of lists it as legal-related positions for that number, but the vast majority, I think at least about 26,000 of those are going to be lawyers. Now, an important number to remember when you're looking for the federal government is this, 0905. That is the series number for attorney or attorney advisor in the federal government when you are searching sites. And one of the sites that I gave you on there, the OPM site, you are able to do searches by series number, and that is the number you want to look at, 0905. You plug that in, you get every attorney advisor position that comes up. You can search by geography and so forth in that OPM site. If you're looking, and these are going to be positions just to get you may not be qualified for them until you graduate, and they may not be positions that you get until later, but they give you a good idea of where attorneys are working in the federal government. So that's a good number to remember when you're looking at that. There are also places that you, other names of legal-related positions that aren't necessarily called attorney. You could work in the federal government as a loan specialist, or a compliance manager, or a personnel manager. There are a ton of different places where a law degree is very, very useful in the federal government. We're going to be having a program next week with the FBI that is also very interesting because you can apply your law degree as an FBI agent as well, and as well as other law enforcement opportunities. So that's something to consider too. One final note on other options we're really not going to be talking about today, but are important, are the JAG Corps. They offer some very good active duty military attorney positions. You can find them for the Army at jagcnet.army.mil, jag.navy.mil, and hqja.jag.mil for the Air Force, if you want to look at that. And those are also good positions, but again, not exactly what we're going to be focusing on today. There are, though, however, also, and this is how vast and intricate the federal government can be, very good civilian positions in the General Counsel's Office of the Branch Military Services. That is the Department of the Army within the Department of Defense, the Air Force, the Navy, have quite extensive and large General Counsel's offices. So they do a lot of different types of work. Those are primarily staffed by civilians. They're not necessarily the JAG Corps. The JAG Corps is different. They're the lawyers on bases. They're handling the active duty personnel. The General Counsel's offices for the military branches are designated to assist the Secretary of the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, or even the Secretary of Defense when needed in more civilian, political, and legal matters. So that's another place to look. And indeed, some of those places do have it. I believe we may not have an opening for that in the for a summer honor position in the government handbook, but I believe the NOW site does connect you to those military organizations for the civilian part. Okay. So, from here, where do you go? Well, really what you want to look at for summer and honors programs, and those are the most important things that you can do while you're in law school. This handbook, and this is just the kind of a facsimile, the introduction and the deadline dates for it that we printed out. But the full site, which is on your green sheet, is really going to be your Bible for that. The University of Arizona has done a really great job at putting together a whole comprehensive list of every agency and every department that is going to have a summer or an honors program. And I highly recommend you do that. Just so you know, I'm going to put up the username and the password. The username is eggplant, and the password is purple numeral 2. I don't know who came up with these. I certainly didn't. Last year it was something like lighthouse and water, but I guess they got a little more creative. So this is what you want it to be using for the username and the password. I suggest you go in, you look at it, you get yourself familiarized with what's on the site, and realize that there are going to be a lot of differences. They're going to be very inconsistent. In a couple of minutes, I'm going to show you a few examples of what you might find on that site and how different they can be. One thing I want to know first, though, is there going to be a difference between first years and a difference between second years. A lot of these agencies will allow people who have finished their first year in law school to work that summer. That's fine. They will generally have later deadlines for these positions because they know that you're just getting into school. So usually those are going to be later. You have to check though to be sure. And this handbook and that site will give you all the information for that. Second years, the deadlines could probably be a little earlier in the fall, maybe around October, November for some, but even some of those might be later into March or February, March usually. So be very careful of that. Sometimes, unfortunately, the agencies themselves don't update their sites, and they don't give the information to the University of Arizona, who's keeping up the site. If you ever come across that, the best rule of thumb is that the date that is there, even if it's for last year, is going to be about the date that you're going to have for the coming year. Almost always. It's not hard and fast, and you should wait and see to make sure when they update. And they're very good about updating the site, by the way. So just make sure you see that. But just realize that some of them are not completely updated. Okay. Let's take a peek at a few examples. Let's say you get in, you go, you get up to your site, you put in your password, you're surfing around and seeing what's there. One place you might come up with, I just picked as an example, the Agency for International Development, USAID. Very good agency. They handle a lot of the foreign loans and foreign aid. They're doing a lot in Iraq right now, so it's a very big agency. You'll get your contact information here, the way to submit, the people that you want to submit to, a link back to the agency itself, and a description of the program. So for instance here it says, and they're up to date, they say in the summer of 2004, the office anticipates hiring 6 unpaid 1Ls and 2L law clerks to perform general legal research and writing for staff attorneys. Okay, now what's important about that? Unpaid. Some are paid, some are unpaid. You have to be careful. Some of these positions won't pay you. You'll probably be eligible for credit or maybe for work study, but a lot of times the agencies themselves will not pay, so be careful when you read that. Fall and spring semester programs are available as well. Well, most of these positions are in Washington, so that's not going to be an option for most people to do a fall or a spring during the term semester program. However, in the summer, 2003, talking about last year, 6 students were hired from a total of over 500 applications received. So that gives you an idea of how competitive it is. These are not second best jobs. These are very, very competitive, very, very good opportunities. And just showing that, maybe 1 in 100 people are going to get them. And so if you do get them, it's going to look very good on your resume, and it's going to be very prestigious. So it's something that you definitely want to consider. Internships last about 8 weeks, and they've divided up into 4 different offices: ethics, contracts, litigation, and global. So here's an opportunity if anyone's interested in international law, a perfect way to do it. Program requirements. Students must have a demonstrated interest in international law issues and must be U.S. citizens. Okay, very important, because you have already here a requirement to be a U.S. citizen. Not every single one of these agencies and cabinets have that requirement, but a lot do. You're going to have to make sure that is something that you're all set with. And it says those selected must successfully pass a security clearance. Again, not every agency has that, but a lot do, which means that could take some time, and it could take some, delving into your background to see what you have done in your past. Usually they're very rudimentary investigations. They're not advanced investigations, so usually it just involves maybe a record check. You might have to go get your fingerprints taken, and then pass through the crime computer down in D.C. Not a problem for most people, but just realize that is part of the process, and it can take a while. So it would help to get your applications in even on the early side. So that's there. Okay. And finally, down here, the application process. Send a resume and cover letter. That's it. Resume and cover letter. Nothing else. So much for the federal government being full of paperwork and problems. Most agencies will simply request a resume and a cover letter. Some may be a writing sample, but it's going to be a pretty simple process. So make sure then, because it's just a resume and cover letter, that you have your resume and your cover letter look really good. And if they are asking for a demonstrated interest in international law, for instance, or international issues, make sure that your resume and cover letter reflect that. So you want to make sure that, down the Career Center, we've seen it, we go through it, we talk to you individually, so you can present your best foot forward. Notice what they don't ask for. Grades. So this is not about grades. You don't have to be in any particular part of the class. There's nothing here that says that. So therefore, experience and interest and a positive attitude about whatever this agency is doing, a commitment to public service, is going to be much more important than that. So keep that in mind. And then they'll give you the application date. Finally, this is January 30th, 2004. So on the Arizona site, this is a very good entry. It's up to date. It gives you all the information. Let's say you want to learn a little more about the agency. You click on top. Okay, boom, here you go. That's what you get. Nothing. It lists a contact name, but sometimes you'll get this on a website for the agency. They don't give you a lot of information. Others do. Others are very good, and they will give you a lot of information. But here it is not that much. However, I did talk to this person, Linda Cope, at the USAID. She's a very nice person, and she confirmed that this summer she anticipates 6 legal interns, and last year they had also 6 out of, she says, 600 applications. She said that the best applicants had international experience, or at least an interest in international affairs. But then again, that's about it. So it's worth your while, if you have any interest at all, to apply. Okay. Let me take a look at another place. Department of the Treasury. Now, this one is interesting because it hasn't been updated yet. And it hasn't been updated on their website either. And that's going to be important because you're going to wonder, is this up to date? Arizona does a really good job of hoping to try to get it and really following up on it. And sometimes they can and sometimes they can't. But again, the information that's going to be on here is going to be information that is going to be good, at least from probably what they had from last year. So here it says approximately 3 to 10 1Ls and 2Ls selected for, again, unpaid clerkships will work full-time during the summer in one of the legal divisions. And some of the legal divisions here, very interesting. Bureau of Engraving and Printing, Community Development, they do Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. They say here Customs. Be careful, again, on the update, because Customs is now part of the Department of Homeland Security. A little side note on the Department of Homeland Security, a lot of agencies have moved there from other agencies. Immigration, parts of Immigration and Naturalization, parts of Customs, Secret Service, a lot of places that have and will probably need a lot of attorneys. However, in my most recent inquiries and discussions with some people at the Department of Homeland Security, they are not really up to speed yet on an honors program or a summer program. They haven't even really set up their internal legal department yet. They're just starting to, and again, as you can imagine, that's going to be from the highest point down, and it's going to be pretty political, and who knows. But hopefully, by next year, there will be a formal summer and postgraduate or honors program set up for the Department of Homeland Security, which is really big, and they're going to need a lot of attorneys. So that's a good place to keep in mind as you go ahead in the future. We go down to program requirements. None have been identified yet. So there you go, no grades, no particular interests, just get your application. And that doesn't mean you don't understand the agency you're applying to. So for Treasury, you want to show an understanding of what they do. They collect money, basically, and they handle money, and they give out money, and they make money. So you want to make sure that you show an interest in a cover letter and a resume in something financial, if you have it, or at least a real desire or interest to learn. So that's something that you want to put on too. If you go to their site, they have a much more comprehensive and complete site than the, let's say, the USAID did. But again, it hasn't quite been updated. Even so, from last year, just as an example, they had people doing a few things where the people in the, they say here, honors program. help ensure that international development banks comply with legal requirements to consider environmental factors in development projects. Okay. Work closely with the Department of Justice in representing the government's interest in terrorism financing litigation. In response to the devastation caused by the terrorist attacks of September 11th, assisted in determining the extent to which the Federal Reserve Board could lend in emergency situations to individuals. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that you could be doing here that's really interesting, whether it's during the summer or whether it's in a postgraduate experience. Okay. And one more, just to kind of show you the wide range of things out there, Department of Commerce. And here, again, it's not updated. So you're going to have to, kind of wait or just go on a little bit of an older date to submit. But here they say the Summer Law Internship Program for 1Ls and 2Ls has become an important recruiting tool, so forth and so on. They have both paid and unpaid. They say here, when available, the paid summer internships are at the GS7 level for 1Ls and between the GS7 and GS9 level for 2Ls. Well, that brings up a bit of a point. What are the GS levels? The GS levels are the general schedule levels of pay, and they go from basically 1 to 15. Most positions that you'd be getting on graduation are around at the 11 level, and a lot of places that are at the summer internship level, again, are 7. The latest table, which is from 2003, 7 was about $33,000 to start, so you can prorate that by the week, and 11 was about $50,000, and that's to start. But they do go up every year by step, and the benefits are very good, so just consider that as something. Okay. One more thing about Commerce. Their website, again, is not particularly helpful. They list a few people, but they don't talk a lot about the program itself. I did actually talk to someone there as well. She offered some information and said that due to budgetary cuts, the programs have been curtailed this year at Commerce. That could be a factor in a lot of these agencies this coming year. A lot of agencies have cut back in their budget. Some few agencies have increased in budget, like SEC, for instance. They have a much bigger budget because of a lot of the requirements of Sarbanes-Oxley and a lot of the scandals and investigations they're doing. So, for instance, they have a lot more budget. A lot of other agencies have been cut, so therefore they don't know what they're going to do. So a lot of places might say, yes, send in an application, we probably will hire some people, but you have to be aware that the budget constraints could be an issue there as well. She did tell me that they have about 6 unpaid and 4 paid summer interns coming up for 2004, and they will rotate through various departments. The Department of Commerce is very interesting. It has a lot of different components to it. They do international trade, they do export enforcement, they control NOAA, which is the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, that handles the weather service, they do the census, and they also oversee the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, which is an excellent opportunity. A lot of lawyers there, and if you have a patent background or are interested in, or have a technical background or are interested in that, that could be something. They have a separate application process, however, and that will also be in the handbook. So that is that. Let me just talk a minute about the importance of the summers. You've all heard what you can do over the summers from probably a lot of different people. If you're a second year, you've already had a summer experience. If you're a third year, you've had 2 summer experiences. They can be very, very good experiences, very useful. And like anything else, they accrue. So if you are interested in, let's say, a permanent federal honors program or postgraduate program where you're actually working full-time personnel for the agency, it would do well to do a summer, because that is what they want to see someone's interest. They really aren't as interested in grades or top-level performance, but they are very interested that you show a commitment to public service, and, even more importantly, a commitment to their particular agency or their particular mission. So if you want to work for the IRS, someone was talking to me about that before the class started. If you want to work for the IRS, then it would be very good to get a summer internship there. If you have a background in tax, or if you're a CPA, even better. Use this experience that you've had in your past to get into some of these places by showing your interest. And so therefore, don't wait until you graduate and say, I want to do an honors program or a postgraduate program. If you're really interested in the federal government, start early, like you would anywhere else. If, let's say you're interested in the DA's offices, you'd want to spend a summer in the DA. If you wanted to work for a very big firm upon graduation, you'd want to work a summer there. It's no different for the federal government. You really want to make sure that you show your interest. That's really paramount importance to them. Okay. And again, you always have to realize the vast scope of what we're dealing with here. There are so many agencies and so many opportunities that if you don't even know a specific place you want to get into, apply to several. And you can, kind of pick and choose and wind up in one that you might find that's very interesting. Because again, they are very competitive, so there's no guarantee you're going to be able to get into any one in particular, so it's a good idea to kind of broaden your range. Okay. Let's see. One note about Justice. Justice is a little bit different. They have probably the most attorneys working for it, not about 9,000 out of the total. I think the next highest departments are Treasury and Defense, which have about 2,000 each. So you can see that Justice is a little bit different. The best place to go to look for justice opportunities is usdoj.gov/OARM. That's Office of Attorney Recruitment and Management. They have a very good site, very comprehensive. You will notice, though, if you go on it and look for honors programs, their deadline was September 15th. So they don't even have that option anymore because it's all online recruiting, so it's over. However, they do have, for post-first year and post-second year summer students, what they call volunteer opportunities. So if you go here to this site and click on volunteer opportunities, they will show you a huge list of departments within Justice that have volunteer opportunities and that you could probably, even though they're not paid, get credit for, or perhaps, again, work study. Many of them. They hire probably 1,000 students in total for that. So it's a very, very good way to get experience. Most of them are in Washington. But other than the honors program, which is extremely competitive at Justice, it's an excellent way to get your feet wet there. The U.S. Attorney's offices are a little different still. And you can find at, just for some background, usdoj.gov at USAO, the United States Attorney Office. And they will give you the contact information for all of the U.S. Attorney's offices, and we will post a lot of those too at the Career Center as we get them in, especially the local ones. But those are different, and they would hire separately from the main Justice Department honors program or summer programs. So look into those separately, and those would be good for summers. U.S. Attorneys, of course, postgraduate. That's a whole different story. They don't have what you'd call a traditional honors program. They have, almost all of them like to see you work for several years, get some good trial experience, work for the DA's offices. Some, unfortunately, are a little bit political in terms of who's been appointed, who's in the administration. So that's something to consider. But those are also excellent jobs if you're interested in trial work, criminal or civil, and those you can look at later. So that's a little extra word about Justice. And that is about the overall view of federal opportunities with a specific mention of summer and honors programs. And again, your most important resource for that is going to be the Government Honors Internship and Handbook. Honors and Internship Handbook from the University of Arizona on the website there, on your green sheet with these password and username. Okay. I will gladly open up the floor to any questions you have. The scope of the federal government, like I said, can be pretty complex, pretty daunting, but it is your government. It's accessible. The information is out there about everyone, every agency, through many different resources. From me, if you want to talk, or any other counselor, happy to set up an individual appointment. In fact, I'd encourage you, if you are going to apply, I'd like to know about it. There are people that I do have contact with at some level that I might be able to tell you about, and even a few that have said, if you see a good student, let us know. So it does help you to let us know that you're doing this. Also, that we can keep kind of a running track of who's applying and who's interested, so we can redirect our efforts. So that's that. Questions? Yes, sir.
What's your name again?
Steve Gord. Yes, sir.
As far as financing a non-volunteer or a volunteer position, unpaid position, could work study, and if we apply for credit, does that mean we can also apply for financial aid?
I don't believe so. I believe that you either get credit or you get work study. I don't think you cannot get both.
It's based on the work study. Is it based on the work study for the year before, or the award that you get for the year before?
As far as I know, and I don't want to be representing too much on financial aid for myself, but I believe the deadline is April 1st for financial aid, a work study through the financial aid office that you would have to be approved for. That could be applied for that next summer. But check that out with Gerard and financial aid.
We have been largest employers for Brooklyn Law students.
I'm sorry?
In the past few years, who have been the biggest employers for Brooklyn Law students specifically?
With the federal government?
Yeah.
I believe we've had quite a few people who have worked for the SEC. I believe we've had several people work at the U.S. Attorney's offices. I would believe we've had people work at the IRS. But the SEC, I think, may be the biggest Brooklyn employer over the past several years. Others? Okay. Oh, yes.
Let me just address
That's
that
John,
last
yes.
question.
Sorry.
We have never made as much report to this program as we have this year. So while we've always done very well